You know that feeling when something just isn't quite adding up? That confusion may not completely clear up just yet, but the bigger picture does start to come together, and suddenly whatever you've been dealing with that has felt unclear starts to make a lot more sense. Here's what's going on, but before we get into it, hi, thanks so much for joining me. I'm Ashley with More Than Your Sun Astrology, and this is your weekly star reflections where we explore what's happening in the sky and how it shows up in your real life. So let's start with the overall atmosphere of the week. Right now, there's an unusual amount of Pisces energy in the sky. If you know anybody who has Pisces in their chart, if you know a Pisces, sometimes they can be a bit unclear on the details. So having a lot of Pisces energy in the sky right now can make things feel confusing at first. You know, it's not always immediately clear what something means, but that's not a bad thing. Not knowing or feeling like you don't have all the answers yet gives you time to reflect. And sometimes that reflection is exactly what helps things finally click. Like I said, there's so much happening in Pisces right now. The sun is in Pisces, Mercury is retrograde in Pisces, Mars is moving through Pisces, and the North Node is in Pisces. It has been for over a year. Even if you don't know what all that means, you can recognize that's a lot of Pisces energy. And so this is where things start to get interesting. How is that going to influence your week? Well, Mars is actually coming together with Mercury retrograde in Pisces. And when those two meet up, communication tends to become more active and animated. You'll want to express what's on your mind and how you're feeling. And because Mercury is retrograde, things that have been on your mind for a while, you're going to be ready to speak on. And because this is happening in Pisces, a lot of what's being said may come from an emotional place. There might be some situations where you've been holding your tongue for a while. Now that's building up, and now you've reached your breaking point, and you might let somebody really have it. So with that being said, it's important to be mindful of how you say things, and also be mindful of becoming defensive if someone is sharing something with you. You might already be noticing this shift in conversations happening around you, or it might be happening in your own life. Now, Mars is also coming together with the North Node this week in Pisces, and the North Node represents the direction you're moving toward or your path that's unfolding ahead. So when Mars and the North Node come together, there can be moments where you're motivated to act on something that feels really meaningful to you. You can be that sense like, I have to do this for me to move my path forward, to move my life forward, to better myself, to get me to the point of where I want to be. It can be a lot of thinking about how you're growing and what you want and making decisive moves to get you to a new point. However, since this is all happening in Pisces, and we know that sometimes Pisces energy can be a bit foggy, be a bit hazy, the motivation you're feeling may not come from a perfectly clear plan, and instead it may just come from a feeling. So you might feel inspired to act quickly on something without a foundation fully in place. And remember, Mercury is still retrograde, so this is really the time for planning your next move, not necessarily making that move just yet. Plan, build, strategize, but don't actually make the final decision yet. I hope that makes sense. But on the bright side, what's happening this week may actually help you recognize where you're ready to move next. And that's going to be super helpful because later in the week, something might shift that changes how you see the situation entirely. Now, outside of all that Pisces energy, we also have Venus and Aries coming together to form a sextile with Pluto and Aquarius. So you've got some fire and air energy showing up, bringing a little bit of lightness to all that emotional stuff. When Venus comes up, we think about topics around relationships, your connections, things that you value. Aries energy is very direct about what it wants, and Pluto tends to reveal a deeper layer. So an example of this could look like realizing you actually want something different in a relationship than you thought you did, or noticing a pattern in how you interact with someone else that you hadn't really paid attention to before. Like, it just might be this subtle acknowledgement or this subtle realization about the workings of inner dynamics between you and somebody else. So this week, there can be a time where something in a relationship becomes very clear. Maybe even there's been some topics that you've been holding back from bringing up, like I mentioned earlier. And maybe it's because you just didn't know how to say what you wanted to say without offending the other person, or you didn't want to start an argument or something like that. Well, Pluto tends to expose honesty. So whatever comes up may feel uncomfortable for a moment, but it can lead to more transparency and openness, which can forge a bond if everybody's open to listening and hearing each other. Be truthful. Now, here's where things really shift. Another important change happening this week is Jupiter stationing direct in Cancer. Whenever a planet stations, its influence becomes stronger. And when we talk about Jupiter, we're thinking about themes around growth, like we talked about with the North Node, expansion, opportunity. And in Cancer, this growth tends to show up in areas of life connected to your home, your family, your emotional state and well-being, your emotional security, and the environments where you feel safe and supported. So an example could be like physically making progress or improving your living situation, remodeling, redecorating, or even moving to a new place, although I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because this is the time to plan, not make moves. But, you know, things happen and come up, and sometimes, you know, it's inevitable. So anyway, those can be things that are showing up for you or you're noticing for someone else. It could also look like feeling more hopeful about a family matter, like maybe you and your siblings, or I don't know, it could even be like you've been at odds with your kids lately and you just feeling so frustrated because you don't know how to get through to them, or you feel like they're not listening to you, or whatever it is. And then something happens this week that sparks movement, and you have this shift in your outlook and in your perspective. You feel a little bit more hopeful about the situation. Jupiter brings optimism. Or maybe you're just simply recognizing what you need in order to feel more emotionally stable within your relationship or within your own self. So if something in your personal life has felt like it's been stagnant, this shift with Jupiter going direct could begin to move things forward again. You'll start to see small signs of progress. Now, it might not happen overnight, but starting this week, moving onward, things are going to start to pick up speed, and it's going to feel like momentum in some category of your life is starting to return. So overall, this week is really about recognition. If I could choose one word to, like, the word of the week, it would be recognition. Something that you felt confused about, or it's been like this heaviness weighing over you, it's going to start to make a lot more sense. Conversations may bring important realizations. We are in Mercury retrograde. I've said it a bunch of times already in this video, but Mercury being retrograde plays such a key role in our daily lives and in our relationships because Mercury rules over communication. And so we have to remember that there will be some breakdowns in communication. There will be some misunderstandings. There will be some people who are being more emotional because they're more emotionally charged than usual, because the communication is coming from a place of how you feel. And sometimes when we're in the moment of feeling a certain way about something, it's difficult to dial back and think about the big picture or think logically about the situation. So this week, conversations are going to bring up very important points, and within your relationships, something might be revealed that is more honest, and emotionally, you will begin to recognize what direction feels right for you. But the awareness that begins to form now can be really important, because once things do start to click, it becomes much easier to understand where you're ready to go next. So as we move through this week, I want you to think about this reflection. Where in your life are things beginning to make more sense? What are you recognizing about a person, a situation, or yourself? Well, that's it for this week. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope you found this helpful. And if so, I'd love to hear your experience in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay in sync with the stars, and I'll see you soon.